Hi, Michael. My name is Sudhir Srinivasan. This is Cinema Express, the cinema division of the New Indian Express newspaper.
Oh, cool.
You play a character called Kiki Kamrena. He's a DEA agent. So maybe I can start by asking you what you really think sets him apart from, say, Steve Murphy, who also, who was a DEA agent in the first 3 seasons of Narcos. How did you view this difference?
Yeah, I mean, I paid attention to mainly my part. I know I've been doing it for 23 years now, so like I know how to, at least I try to think I do, is just focus on my part and try to see how I can help the series along by telling its story. And Kiki's story is that of a man who kind of is fed up with the way that things are seeing and the way the kind of the system is built in a way, where like there's miscommunication, there's no organization. Something very bad is happening and nobody's talking about it. Nobody can do anything about it. And so people, you get upset. Kiki gets upset and he wants some change.
And he's really driven by his conscience, isn't he?
Yeah.
And the sense of duty cannot be suppressed, clearly. People around him are comfortable in their own space, doing their own things, sort of a bit oblivious to the evil that occurs around them.
Yeah. And because they choose not to see it. There's some people that are just like lambs, just like going, along with the work and not really doing anything. And he asks, like, do you guys not see this? And
do you think he's just wired that way? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I think especially because he's given an oath to protect people and to arrest the bad guys, right? To keep this world safe.
Right.
And then when there's obvious bad happening and nobody's acting upon it, like it makes him even more mad. The fact that there's dead bodies like coming around left and right and nobody's doing anything about it, he gets very upset. And I think that's what motivates him, and especially when he keeps saying that there's, that this is happening and nobody believes him.
And there's also a lot of bureaucratic issues, red tapeism that, hinders even those who want to do good from doing good.
Yeah, and that's what feeds the fire, and that's what leads to an obsession. If there were some obvious ghosts here or something like that, and you're telling like that's why it's moving, and you're the only person that can see it.
Right.
That's one thing. But if everyone can see it, but they're choosing not to see it, then it makes them completely upset.
And I found it quite fascinating in one episode where he really disguises himself as one of them and gets in to see what's going on, which harks back to an old method of figuring out things, doesn't it? Even though you have aerial surveillance, but that's not useful. And you really have to get down to the ground and get your hands dirty to figure out things.
Especially in a foreign country where things aren't necessarily run the way they are in America, and there's a reason for that. Like number one, you're visiting Mexico. You're not, the Kiki Camarena's character's only a visitor. He's supposed to do things that are, observe and report, and so he gets to question a lot of things. Is like, these pictures look very old.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if it was because it was so green, and we're like, whoa, we're going through a drought. You know what I mean? Or something like that.
And he's a man of action, isn't he? He's not one to be confined to a desk with a few papers around.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what makes it a little bit interesting. He wasn't as confined because the DEA wasn't as organized then.
How did your own proximity to the setting of this story sort of help you understand it, or were there any new revelations about a place that you're quite familiar with?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely informs you, because say you're running on, I don't know, you're running down to New York City. There's a lot of people to navigate, so it tells you a lot about that, that geography and the place that how you handle yourself. But if you're in Mexico and it's barren, desert, like how are you going to hide?
Right.
And what are you going to do? So it does inform you, and then the temperature and the heat and the water that you need to survive, and to maybe do a stakeout, and also the structure of the government, because in order for this to happen, the cops had to be bought out, and they were more than willing to comply. The government officials and politicians were in on it. Then the government, as a whole became part of it. And you have to battle a big monster, and it's literally like battling Godzilla.
Were you familiar with the real events on which this story is based on?
No, I wasn't. I later found out that there was like a Time magazine article written about him. I did a lot of Wikipedia, and that's what the great thing about the show, by the way. Like, I did all my research, and I thought I knew it, and then I read the scripts, and I was like, wow, I didn't know any of it, because you know they talked to the wife a lot, as did I, and they talked to Jamie Kirkendall, which is his boss, and and they found a lot of different parts of the story that weren't known to people. So even if they know how you know it sort of ends, they don't know all the little things.
So in terms of the little details like body language, for example, it wasn't important that you faithfully reproduce exactly how that person must have been.
No, I think for me it's more the psyche. You know what I mean? Okay, the man's driven, right? And, you know, from an actor's point of view, he's a very driven person. Why?
Right.
You know, some people are driven because they're running from their past. They're running from poverty. You know, they're ashamed of how poor they are. So if they're ashamed, then they really want to play up how much money they have right now. You know what I mean? If they feel a sense of wanting to separate themselves.
Which explains the extravagant lifestyle some criminals lead, for example.
Yeah, exactly. So, but, they understand it. Like maybe when you're a little kid, you're like, you know what? I'm going to be rich and I'm going to get out of this place because they hate it or something like that, you know? So it's not just like, you're a rich person and you buy expensive things. Why?
Right.
That's the job of the actor. And for me, it's because he was fed up. He says, you know what? Nobody's doing anything about it. I might as well do it myself.
Right. And you're also returning to television after a while.
Yeah, me.
With Narcos, yes.
Yeah, not Kiki. Yeah, I think I've done one or two pieces of television in the last 15 years or something like that.
Yeah.
It's been pretty crazy.
Yeah. So what's the attraction this time?
Well, the first time was Eastbound and Down, an HBO show. It was funny. It's because Danny McBride and Jodie are so funny, you know, and so I just wanted to work with those guys. Then it was Grace Point, which because the script was so good, and then this one, you know, the scripts and the stories are so good. So me, I basically want to work and like be part of cool stories, or you know, just projects that I would like to see.
So it doesn't matter if it's television or cinema.
Nowadays, it doesn't really matter because it's not like I'm not putting down like you know, other TV shows that you know that are network shows, but they're kind of repetitive and you do the same motions all the time. Here, you really didn't know what was happening. You know, it's not like they open up on a crime scene and then all of a sudden there's like little things and then you're like, you solve it, you know, 30 minutes later and then you're the big hero. And then you have another case that's exactly the same formula. This one's completely different. And also the amount of time that you have to shoot for something like that is longer, and you know they look at more details. Yeah.
As a last question, I mean, I've personally been an admirer of how you bring humor into into many of the characters you do. But obviously, this character does not.
You know what?
He doesn't. I don't remember if he ever laughs, for example.
Yeah. Exactly. You know what's funny? Like he laughs with his kids and with his wife. But what's interesting is that there's no time for it. You know, whenever I try to like. You can put a humor into anything. There was no time for that here. You know, there was it was very much, you know, it was by the, you know, he was so driven that a joke felt like a humor felt like it stole away from the scene.
I understand.
So I'm like, I just didn't find any room for that.
I understand. Thank you very much for this comment.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.